Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's reset conversation. Um, I think pretty much everybody on here knows who or what reset is, but just in case you don't, we are an education organization. We try to teach people about climate change and the solutions, which are part of Drawdown, and that actually are already some of them, most of them, in process now. And so this evening, we have Dr. Sal, who is with us, and I'm going to read a little bit of his bio. Oops, if I found it here, just give me a moment. Well, maybe I'll just let him introduce himself.
That'll work, really.
That'll work.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate being here. So yes, I'm Sal Lacagnina. I'm originally from New York. Did my training there, moved down to Fort Myers, so actually to Cape Coral in 1993. I have three kids. I'm an internist by profession, but I worked for Lee Health for 26 years. I was the medical director for the Lee Physician Group. I ran a weight management program for a number of years, and I was the director for their employee health. So we really implemented a lot of preventive medicine things at the hospital while I was there. But then about 4 years ago, I left and started a concierge lifestyle medicine practice, really focusing on number one, I really wanted with the goal of just being able to spend more time with people and help individuals to stay healthy, to really do a lot of good preventive medicine. And although I still do a lot of internal medicine, my goal is to take people off of medicine instead of putting them on medicine. If they need medicine, fine, that's available. But really, our goal is to get people to follow what I say. There's 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine: nutrition, exercise, social support, sleep, stress, and purposeful living. And really just helping individuals to do those simple things makes a tremendous difference in the quality of their lives and really in the longevity, especially when it comes to nutrition. As I was mentioning before we got on the recording here, in our practice we have a teaching kitchen, we have a cafe, we have a gym, we have a guy that does massage therapy. We previously had an acupuncturist, but she left. And having that type of a team available really allows people to stay well. And then again, just being able to spend more time with your physician really makes a big difference. So that's the focus. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. So I'll shut up for a minute and let somebody else speak.
I'm just going to jump in for a moment and let everybody know that you, Dr. Sal, are happy to take questions anytime during your talk.
Yes, absolutely.
If folks prefer to put them into the chat, we could be monitoring that. But it looks like we have a nice sized group today. You can just raise your hand either visually or digitally, and
Right.
Dr. Sal will take your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what, Dr. Sal, I do think that it's probably good for you to talk about the fact that concierge medicine normally is not something that Medicare or insurance programs cover, but that people need to understand why they don't cover it and why doctors prefer that kind of a program. So why don't you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, really, unfortunately, the payment structure is the problem. And I always say it was really unfortunate that whenever this started decades ago, when physicians got involved with health plans and insurances, I think it really dramatically changed the way healthcare is provided. Because as time went on, the amount of time that patients were able to spend with their physicians got less and less. The range for the average amount of time that a patient spends with their physician is from 7 to 15 minutes. So even 15 minutes is way too short, and 7 minutes is ridiculous. And that does actually happen in a number of subspecialties where the physician is just in and out and somebody else does a cursory exam and such. So a concierge practice allows the physician and the patient to spend a lot more time together. As I mentioned, I spend an hour with every one of my patients. So we only have a finite number of visits every day and every week. But I also have the availability to get people in when they need to be seen. That's another part of the problem. Tradition when you practice traditional healthcare, because you're so slammed with patients every single day. If somebody calls and says, I'm sick, I need to come in, and you've already seen 25 patients, it's really hard to add many more patients to the list because that day is very long. In my practice, I could see people same day when they get sick. With the technology that we've learned how to use through the pandemic and using Zoom visits, oftentimes I don't want people in the office if I know that they're really sick, but I can not really examine them obviously over the phone, over the Zoom session, but get a history from them and see what's going on. And then, prescribe an antibiotic or an antiviral, something that they need. But really the focus is on the time that you spend with people in a concierge practice, the ability to really understand what their lives are like, because so much of healthcare, and I tell people this, healthcare does not happen when the patient is sitting with me in my exam room. Healthcare happens when they leave the exam room and when they're living. As you mentioned before, self-care is healthcare, which I love that saying.
Yeah.
If you don't do self-care when you leave the office, then you're not doing your own healthcare. And really, when you think about it, is there anything more important as a priority on a daily basis than your health? When you wake up in the morning, it should be, okay, how am I going to stay healthy today so that I can do all the other things that I need to do on a regular basis? So that's what we focus on. And I tell you, not only the response that I get from my patients, but the improvement in their health, because we track metrics very closely. As an example, we have an in-body machine. It's a body composition scale. So it not only does it measure their weight and calculate the individual's BMI, but it tells you how much muscle mass you have, how much body fat you have, and then we tweak their nutrition and exercise routine based on that. And we track metrics very closely. We do a lot of advanced blood testing for heart disease. I send a lot of my patients for what's called Clearly. It's a cardiac CT angiogram. It's a non-invasive angiogram, which gives you it tells you whether or not you have any plaque in your heart and what type of plaque you have and whether it's risky. So we do a lot of advanced stuff to really show people where they're at today and then define an action plan for where they want to be a year from now or 3 years or 5 years from now. Yeah, and I could go on, and you probably have to stop me at some point because I could talk about this stuff for hours.
So that plan obviously includes a diet of some sort. And I hate to use that word because diet means that's a bad word for most people, but a way to eat, because that's really the basis of lifestyle medicine is the way you eat and exercise. Right. So.
Right. Yeah. And we try not to use the word diet when we talk about plant-based eating, which is really a healthier way of eating. We don't use the word vegan because people get all freaked out. It's a silly term. What we say is we're going to develop a healthy eating nutrition plan, however you want to describe it, but it's just a healthier way of eating. I get these little clips on my phone, which is really cool, of these gorillas. And when you see how gorillas eat, if you think about it, the biggest, strongest animals on the planet are herbivores. They don't eat meat, they don't have dairy, and they eat, gorillas obviously eat all raw fruits and vegetables. And you can't say, when it's really interesting when I meet some people and they say, well, if you don't eat meat, how are you going to get your protein? Tell that to a gorilla or an elephant or a giraffe or a rhinoceros. These are really the healthiest animals on the planet, and they eat stuff that comes out of the ground. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the foundation for healthy living is what you put in your mouth every single day. Then you add the other things on and you say, okay, now I want to start exercising, getting enough sleep, managing my stress, having good social support, having a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So when you focus on those things, I think people really start to enjoy living again because they really feel good.
What do you think about GMO foods?
Yeah, we've agribusiness really has done a major disservice to healthcare because genetically modified foods are, they're tainted with chemicals. And the way that they genetically modify the DNA, genetically modified foods were made specifically so the plants can tolerate more pesticides. And one of the theories right now for Parkinson's, the rise of Parkinson's and a lot of neurodegenerative diseases is the exposure to pesticides.
Oh,
So we have to be really careful about what we put in our mouths, remembering that a lot of foods are processed and they're tainted with chemicals and bacteria and viruses and such. So, the best way to eat would be for everybody to have their own garden,
yeah.
you know. And also if you're eating meat, because I can't say that food is cultural, food is emotional, and you have to be careful not to be so overzealous in your recommendations to ostracize people. So getting to know them, again, getting to know the individual and what they really like is important. And then you say, okay, if you're going to eat meat, how many times a week are you going to do that? Try to get food, meat that's grass fed and not grain fed and such. So you make the recommendations based on what works for the individual. I like to try to meet my patients where they're at instead of, as I mentioned before, trying to be, so patriarchal that or paternalistic that you're telling them what to do. Because it's got to be something that both people agree with.
What do you think about I call them faux foods, but these are the,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't
yeah,
know what else to call them.
yeah. I think they're transition foods because when you think about for some people, the difficulty of transitioning from the standard American diet, which is basically meat and dairy, to the other end of the spectrum, which is plant-based eating, you have to do that. Number one, you have to do that slowly. And you also have to give them some transitional foods because if somebody says, like I really like to eat a burger or chicken fingers or whatever, a lot of these faux foods are helpful in that regard. You have to remember they are somewhat processed, but they're healthier as far as the initial ingredients. And again, you have to learn how to read labels. It's important to read the labels to see what's actually in the foods.
I have a question to either Linda or you. What do you mean exactly by faux foods? These, you mean
Fake
like
meats.
fake meat? Oh, okay, like the
Yeah, the
Impossible
fake meats.
Burger is
Yeah,
now.
the Beyond Burgers
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
Impossible Burgers and such. But you can make healthy burgers in your own home. Make a bean burger, quinoa burgers, and things like that, which are certainly a lot healthier. I remember once when the Impossible Burgers first came out, they were actually sold at Burger King.
Oh,
So I got one the first time and I ate it and it was okay. And I bought one the second time after that and I didn't eat it right away. So when I brought it home, it was cold and I put it in the microwave and I took it out and it smelled horrible. And I was
oh.
like, what the heck is in this stuff that it smelled so bad I threw it out and I'm like, I'm not eating those things anymore because it was just horrible. So you have to really know what's in the food that you're eating. And when you're reading labels, the smaller the number of ingredients, the better. If you're reading a label, number one, fruits and vegetables don't have labels on them, right? So you know
No.
that they're healthier. But when you're reading a label, if you're reading the label and it seems like you're back in your chemistry class in college, you probably shouldn't be eating that stuff. So it really is important just to become your own nutritionist, if you will.
So when it comes to protein, I know that combining certain foods gives you like rice and beans, you can get your protein.
Yeah.
But there's something that's somebody says, oh, you need 35 or you need 15 grams of protein a day. Is it different for different people, or what is the general rule of thumb for protein?
Yeah, it's slightly different, but the rule of thumb is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram. So it's so it's generally about 70 grams or 80 grams of protein per day. So about 20 grams per meal, which is pretty easy to get. When you look at different foods, as an example, 100 calories of broccoli gives you about 11 grams of protein. So when you really look at, the types of proteins that are in vegetables, quinoa, beans are really high in protein. They're very high in fiber, which is really good for your digestive system and all. But the general rule is about 20 grams per meal, or about 60 to 80 grams per day. If the individual is doing a lot of weightlifting, then they can tolerate a little bit more, but not a lot more, because too much protein is hard on your kidneys.
Yeah.
And if you go to traditional gyms, a lot of the people in the gyms, although they're not necessarily formally educated in nutrition, tell people that they have to eat like 150 grams of protein a day, which is really detrimental. So I just tell people, if you're going to a trainer in the gym, tell them, let's do the physical therapy part of it and leave the nutrition out of it, because that really should not be done by people that are not educated in nutrition.
So, Dr. Sal, for those people who are perhaps transitioning from a conventional American diet to a more plant-based diet, do you have key guidelines that you usually offer?
Yeah, we actually have meal plans that we use to tell them, what options would be palatable for them for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks if you need a snack. A lot of the people that I see are actually trying to lose weight. So I tell them, if you're trying to lose weight, obviously don't add more calories to your diet. But we do meal planning. As I mentioned before, we have a plant-based chef that works in our kitchen. She prepares a lot of the food and helps people with meal planning and such. And then through a lot of insurance programs, individuals do have the opportunity to sit with a nutritionist, and in many cases, it's covered by their insurance. So I tell them, take advantage of that, because it's really helpful. It's very difficult sometimes if you say to an individual, try to really limit the standard American foods. And when you tell people, when they think about it, okay, you're telling me not to eat a lot of meat and dairy, so what the heck can I eat? Because they start to think about, well, do I have to eat salads for every meal? No, there's so many other foods that you should be eating, taking advantage of tofu, tempeh, different types of proteins, just edamame alone, which is really a bean that's high in fiber and such. So there's a lot of education that really comes into it. And there literally are thousands of recipes, free recipes that are online that you can use to really start to transition the way that you should. I think Holly has a question.
I do have a question. I have a couple, but this one's coming to my mind because of work I'm doing on my own health right now. This is a year in my life where I've decided to recreate my human body so that I can
Good for
talk.
you. Good
So
for
I can
you.
be here in 20 years, which I'll be over 90.
Good for you. Excellent.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about when you sit down with your client or patient that you have them set goals about where they want to be, say, in 2 years and 4 years and 10 years.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you see that as adding almost a spiritual component of healing oneself, with visualization and things like that. I don't know how to phrase this question right, but is there a spiritual or a psycho-spiritual component to the work you do to motivate your patients to move towards a more healthy lifestyle? So I'm trying to visualize myself in the future, like 4 years from now, and 10 years from now, and 20 years from now. And I'm actually see myself a lot more healthy than I am now 4 years from now. So I'm trying to bring that person into this person and the time stream. And that's a little like quantum physics that I'm practicing in my life right now. But I was wondering if you work with the person on every level when you see a patient, or you're mostly focused on exercise, diet, and nutrition, sleep, stress.
No, that's a perfect, not only your question, but the way you phrase it is fabulous. And I do ask people to think about, what do you think your health is going to look like a year, 3 years, and 5 years from now if you do nothing different, or if you do some things different? Where do you want to see yourself? Also, what are you able to do physically now that you would like to continue doing, or do you want to do more? For the individuals that are getting older and they can't even get on the floor and play with their grandchildren, okay, let's work on something like that. So visualization, number one, I think that's one point that you brought up, I think is fabulous. So I turned 65 this year. I run regularly with a guy that's like 45, and I have no problem keeping up with him, and I want to be able to continue to do that. So that's part of my long-term goal. And I think everyone should really think about, how do you see yourself in a few years from now? If you there's a really cool short video on YouTube. It's called Make Health Last. If you haven't seen it, you got to pull it up and look at it. It's called Make Health Last. It's actually a split screen. It's got the same guy on both sides. On one side, he's aging in the standard American way, and on the other side, he's aging in a healthier way. So at one point, he's looking at his wrist and he's looking at a really cool wristwatch, and you can tell that he's dressed up and he's probably going to be going somewhere. On the other side, he's looking at his wrist and he's got a hospital band on. And what he's pulling up around his neck is an oxygen cannula, not a nice necktie. So when you really think about it, that's how most people end their lives in this country. Most people end their lives in sickness, not in wellness. They spend the last 10 or 15 years of their lives with chronic illnesses because they really haven't done the work to stay healthy and to think about, how do I want to spend my retirement years? For me, I want to continue to be active. I just started recently playing pickleball, which is a blast. So visualization, I think, is great. The other thing that you mentioned is developing goals. So one of the things that I have my patients do is develop a SMART goal. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And I actually tell them, I want you to write this out and give it to me. This is your homework, because if you're not specific with your goals, then you typically don't get them done. If I say to one of my patients, you need to start exercising, and they say, yeah, I'm going to start exercising, they leave the office and they never do anything different. But if you really get specific about it and actually put it in your calendar, meal planning and meal prep should be put in your calendar. Do that on the weekend, and batch meals. Do the same thing with your exercise, put it in your calendar. So the more specific you are with your goals, the more likely it is that you're going to get them done. So yeah, fabulous points that you made.
Well, those are great tips that you just gave too. Thank you.
Yeah, and you mentioned, spiritualization and such. So I was raised Catholic, but I go to a Christian church now. And for people that are religious, and there's obviously a lot of commonalities between Christianity and Judaism. Your body is supposed to be your temple. And if you abuse it, the more you abuse it, the worse it's going to be as time goes on. So whatever you believe in, if there is some sort of higher power that you believe in, I think the advice from the higher power would be, take care of your body, because you only get one body and you only get one life. And actually, there's another cool poem that I heard and read recently. It's called the Dash poem, DASH. And the poem is about your birth year and your death year, and there's a dash between those two dates. And what happens within the dash is what you will be remembered by and what you will achieve. So what are you going to do? How are you going to spend your dash between your birth year and your death year? Because that really makes a difference. So when you start to think about it that way, it's like, wow, am I really being specific enough about thinking about how I'm staying healthy to make sure that I can do all the things that I want to do?
Good tips.
Yeah. So I was wondering how we bring caring for the planet keeping people fed, regenerative agriculture, and drawdown solutions into a conversation about living a healthy lifestyle.
Right, right. And honestly, that it really is where the answer is plant-based nutrition. You know, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, the Plantrician Project, the work that Dr. Barnard does with Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the work that Dr. Ted Barnett does up in Rochester, New York. You know, there are a lot of organizations where they're focusing specifically on lifestyle behaviors and plant-based eating. Dr. Stoll, who runs the Plantrician Project, that is their major focus. And when you look at those three areas that you just mentioned, how do we keep people healthy? How do we keep the planet healthy? And how do we protect animals? You know, what really blows my mind, it's really interesting. I can't watch the commercials on television for when they, I guess it's through the ASPCA, because I really wonder what these people that run the organizations are doing, aside from saying, okay, we should protect dogs. But what about the rest of the animals that we're killing on a daily basis in the millions? You know, I think the number that I heard is 1 billion animals annually are killed for food. So when you think about, you know, the torture that these animals go through before they're actually slaughtered to become food for people, which we know is really not necessary. And then agricultural business is a major drain and strain on the planet.
Yes.
You know, it produces so much ozone and contributes to so much climate change that it really is very concerning. So, you know, there have been numerous studies that show when people try to eat less of the standard American foods, how that benefits obviously the animals, the planet, and humans. So it really is, you know, in and of itself, plant-based nutrition is the foundation that will improve all those three areas. And I know a lot of people have difficulty, you know, wrapping their head around that and believing that it's true, but it is true. I mean, their research is very clear. So if we're concerned about our own personal health, if we love animals, then we should love all animals, not just certain animals. And if we are concerned about the world that our children and grandchildren will live in years to come, we have to protect the planet also, you know. What is that saying? There's no planet B.
Yeah.
Like there's no plan B.
No plan
So,
B.
yeah. Yeah. So it really is. So it's a good, you know, a good part of the conversation for sure.
What do you think about supplementation for on a plant-based diet? Do you if so you make sure you get all your vitamins?
Yeah. The two supplements that you absolutely have to take, number one, you have to take B12 because you only get B12 through animal protein. So you have to supplement with B12. And most people, despite the fact that we live in a sunny climate, most people, and we did this when I was at Lee, we checked everybody for vitamin D levels and everybody is deficient. So I have most of my patients taking both of those. If you're concerned that the individual is not absorbing what they're eating, the nutrition that they're taking in, then I have them do a micronutrient test. I don't like the shotgun approach, you know, because, and that's really the way most people take supplements. They just take whatever they think they need without being very specific. You know, if I'm going to put a person on blood pressure medicine or a cholesterol medicine, then we're actually measuring something in their blood to see that things are getting better. The same thing with supplements, because oftentimes individuals are taking supplements that they don't necessarily need, or they're not taking the ones that they actually do need. So doing a blood test to check the levels of your vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants is definitely worth the money that you spend on a test like that.
I'm curious as to How did you come to this lifestyle medicine and plant-based foods for yourself as a practice? What made you? I know when I called you years ago when you were working at Lee Health that you were reading Forks Over Knives, which
Yeah.
I was very unusual for a doctor. So can you tell us how you came to that?
Yeah, after doing general internal medicine for 20 years or so, what you see quite often is people don't get better. They just don't get healthier. They're coming in for prescriptions for the most part. They don't, as we mentioned before, they don't spend enough time with their physician to really get the knowledge that they need. So I really started to think about as I was getting older, how can I take care of my own health so that I continue to be active? I have three kids. I have my daughter just turned 16 yesterday, so how do you keep yourself healthy? So I started reading all the, Forks Over Knives and Dr. T. Colin Campbell's book and, so many of the other authors that we know have been doing this work for years. Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Furman, all of these people that have really devoted their lives to figuring out how to help their patients and themselves stay healthier. So I decided, in my own practice that I was going to do more preventive medicine. I did the board certification. I was actually in the first class that got certified in lifestyle medicine through the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I did a board certification in anti-aging and regenerative medicine, learning a lot about hormones, which we do a lot in our office. We do a lot of hormone therapy in the office. And when you internalize something as a physician, I think you can be more clear to your patients about what could be helpful to them. And it's really interesting. They have done studies. So physicians who smoke never, for the most part, don't talk to their patients about not smoking. And physicians who are overweight don't talk to their patients about exercise.
Oh my goodness.
So, and I've always told, when I was working for Lee and managing the physician group, I would tell them, you as a healthcare provider, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, or whomever, you should think of yourself as a role model for healthy living. And you should try to convey that. You don't have to look like the healthiest person in the world, but you should really convey the fact that you're trying to be healthier. So, really through my own changes personally and then professionally. And that's really one of the reasons that I wanted to transition into this new practice because this is really what I do on a daily basis, which again is so much fun because you can see people getting healthier and they really love it.
What can you say about, I mean, what's facing a large percentage of Americans because I forget how many are turning 65 every day about Alzheimer's and dementia as far as a prevention kind of diet?
That the word that you just used is exactly the right word. The only thing that you can do is try to prevent Alzheimer's from occurring in the first place. Alzheimer's is probably a vascular disease of the brain. It's very similar to what happens in people's hearts. The arteries get clogged up because of this typical standard American diet and the way people live in this country. And if you're not supplying the organ, whether it's your heart or your brain, with the proper oxygen and nutrition, the heart goes to mush, the brain goes to mush. There are no good treatments for Alzheimer's. Of all the medications that are on the market, none of them work. There's no cure for it. So none of these medications could be seen as a cure. And most of them don't do a whole lot to even prevent the progression. So the only thing that you can really do is try to prevent it. And you prevent it the same way we say what's good for the heart is good for the brain. The same way that you protect your heart with healthy eating and exercise, you do the same thing for your brain. If by some chance, when you get tested for the ApoE gene, which is a gene that increases your risk for Alzheimer's, the only thing you don't do it, you still can't do anything different with that knowledge, other than maybe it makes you a little bit more, focused on doing the right thing, knowing that you have a genetic predisposition.
So that is something that that just comes with age, because there are people who are eat plant-based diets most of their life and they still end up with that. So it's just something that happens with age then?
Well, it's certainly more associated with age, and the percentage of people with Alzheimer's increases significantly as you get older. You know, somebody in their 90s is going to have some form of cognitive decline,
Okay.
and the risk, you know, increases with age. But when you think about it, how many people do you know that have been plant-based forever?
Uh, Very few.
I
Joe,
don't
I
know
think
anybody.
how long
Right.
has Joe's a
Yeah.
vegetarian.
Right. You know, so most people that I meet, you know, and I've had a few patients in the last week that have been plant-based for 10 or 15 years, and they've still developed some heart disease, but the heart disease developed before they were plant-based.
Oh,
It started, you know, when they started eating the standard American foods, and they did that for 50 years before they decided to do plant-based eating. So it's what you do from early on that really makes a difference.
does anybody else have any other questions that they'd like to ask?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
go ahead.
you mentioned Parkinson's and Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
and I was wondering if you were aware of some of the brain health research that's being done about the cyanobacteria in our waterways and the effects that it has when it becomes airborne, that that it causes certain diseases. And they're
No, can you tell us?
yeah, Joe, maybe you can help me because I'm having a little brain thing right now. Um, yeah, when there was all the blue-green algae blooms in our waterways that were really extreme, about one was at about 7 or 8 years ago.
2018, 2019.
Yeah, see, I knew you could help me with this part, Joe. Because Joe is working for clean water, as all of us are. Most of us are on this call.
Okay.
There's been research. They found clusters of people with cancer and also with Parkinson's disease and ALS, especially ALS and Parkinson's disease in the Philippines. First, they found it, and the clusters where they found them there, and some other countries too. There had always been really big algae blooms of cyanobacteria, a blue-green algae. And so there's research being done at the Brain Health Institute in Montana, I think.
No, it's in Wyoming.
It's Wyoming. Thank you. See, it takes a team for my brain right now.
Right.
But it's been a while since I've talked about this. But I was wondering if you knew about it. We actually did it in service for Lee Health doctors about 4 years ago on this research that's being done and the breakthroughs that they're hoping to stumble upon by studying the effects of airborne cyanobacteria in certain where it happens a lot. And so I was just wondering if you'd heard about that. And if not, I'm happy to turn you on to. I just have to pull them up out of my.
I think it's Paul Cox. Is it Paul Cox?
Paul Cox is one of them. Yeah, there's 3 specific doctors. The other one's name is Metcalf, and I can't remember his first name. But I think you might be really interested in this. And you know,
Absolutely.
Long time
if you
ago,
could send me the links, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll dig them up, and then maybe Joe can help me, or Gary too. But there's a couple of films, and so I'll send you the links to the films too.
That would be great.
That were made right in Southwest Florida. So
yeah, you really have to think about what we're exposed to, and you know, avoidance, obviously, if there's ways to avoid it. And again, you know, what are we doing to our waterways that this is happening?
Exactly.
And
the
really
root cause of it is agriculture, a whole lot. And
absolutely, sure.
That we're just growing sugar and we're raising cattle all along the Caloosahatchee River and around the Kissimmee watershed. And that is what's going into the water that's creating super nutrients. And then the cyanobacteria blooms, and it's not only not healthy for people, it's killing it's killing all the seagrasses, and so the manatees are going down. It's all connected. We're all so
Absolutely. Right.
So if we get our nutrition right, then we don't have to be growing all that stuff.
Exactly. Right.
So this is a really good climate solution, even though even more important to us personally is our own physical health. So
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to connect all those dots.
Yeah, the domino effects are just incredible when you really start to think about what happens as a result of, what am I doing that really affects so many other areas of the world. So, yeah, I think that's a phenomenal thing to work on. And yeah, and then send me whatever you can because I definitely am interested in learning more about that myself.
I
And again,
will.
for
I mean, I'm
people,
worried about my own brain right now that I couldn't remember those two doctors' names.
Yeah.
So I'm working
Well,
on my short-term memory, because
sure,
I'm
sure.
getting
Well,
older. Yeah.
that's definitely part of it. I mean, when we talk about staying healthy, how do you keep your brain healthy? Learning a new language, learning how to dance, something that you've never learned that you didn't know how to do before. Parkinson's is somewhat treatable. Alzheimer's, as I mentioned, is less treatable. ALS is not treatable. People die very quickly when they get ALS. So these neurodegenerative diseases are very scary.
I never met anybody with ALS until I moved to Florida.
Yeah, I've had a few patients that have died in the last couple of years with it. It's really horrible. It's a really horrific disease.
It is. One of my best friend's husband just died a few days ago from it.
I'm
And,
sorry.
and
So
they
let's
trace
let's
back
try
his
to.
ALS to Agent Orange in Vietnam.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a number of patients that were in the military. Before we leave, I want to just talk for a minute about the Vegan Street Festival. I think we
Oh, yeah.
have that. We have a slide on that. So for people that have not attended, so we did this last year. It's coming up again, as you see here on the slide, February 25th from 10 to 4 p.m. The address is here, 915 Southeast 14th Place, which is right behind Cafe U, if you don't know the place. So Cafe U is a plant-based cafe that has phenomenal food. Marlise Lapper is the lady that owns the place and runs the place, and it's just great stuff to get there. But the festival in and of itself, last year I think we had about 100 vendors, mostly people that were selling plant-based foods, and other things related to healthy living. We have 4 speakers this year. I'm going to be speaking. Dr. Rick Bloy, who's an OBGYN doc that does a lot of wellness and hormone work. We have uh, we, um, Melissa Furman, who is a health coach, who's actually coming from I think she's living in Denver now, where she's going to be coming and talking about how do you take the knowledge that you learn about healthy eating and actually putting that into practice. And then I think we have one other person that I'm not sure if one other individual is coming. So we're going to have 3 or 4 speakers. And again, lots of stuff going on that day. We generally have about 5 or 6 thousand people showing up at these events. This is probably the 6th one that we've done since, I don't know, 2018, something like that. So if you haven't been, or if you have been, come and join us on that day. It's really a fun day. Bring your sunscreen because last year it was really sunny and everybody got sunburned. So make sure you wear your sunscreen.
Dr.
Hopefully
Sal, I
this.
have a question.
Yeah.
I have been a vegetarian for about 35 years. Way back
Good for
then,
you.
it was quite difficult to eat out.
Oh,
Yeah.
And when I came down here from New York, people do like their meat down here. Do you
Mhm.
do you find it that over the last few years it has become easier to eat out uh, with a plant-based diet? More restaurants are offering, dishes that we can eat.
I think more restaurants are offering more plant-based foods, but what I find even more helpful is just to become very prescriptive when you do go to a restaurant. And like last night, I took my daughter and some of her friends out. She wanted to go to Olive Garden to have her 16th birthday. So I love eggplant, and traditionally they make it with tons of cheese. So I told them just leave it dry, put some, some sauce on the side, and give me a salad to eat. So I think even at a restaurant like that, if you are prescriptive and tell them what you want and what you don't want, you can really make almost any restaurant into a plant-based restaurant. But there certainly are more and more places that you can go to now that are offering healthier food because people are demanding it, and that's really what we should tell these restaurateurs. Hey, put a few plant-based options on the menu, and we can give you more business.
Thank you.
Yeah, see, and you look like a typical individual who has been taking care of himself. You're thinner and you're healthier looking, and that's really what I see traditionally. People that really do this for a long enough time period look younger. They're more functional. Their brains work better. So, and there is a big difference. I mean, we have an obesity epidemic in this country, and there is absolutely there's a physiologic reason why carnivores are always heavier than people that eat more plant-based foods. Their microbiome grows different bacteria, and the bacteria that's in the colon of a carnivore had the bacteria have actually learned how to absorb more calories from the food that you eat. So specifically, carnivores are always heavier than people that are eating plant-based foods because they have different bacteria in their system. So the plant-based foods really change your microbiome, which allows you to stay very healthy. And there's a real connection. There's the gut-brain connection because the bacteria in your gut, the majority of serotonin, which is an antidepressant hormone, is actually made in your gut, not in your brain. So there's lots of reasons. There's really a lot of reasons to eat plant-based foods.
I know a fair amount about being vegetarian. I never had learned that about
Yeah.
serotonin being produced in the
Yep.
stomach.
Yeah. The microbiome there's a lot of research ongoing now with the microbiome that's really fascinating. They're doing Dr. Perlmutter, the neurologist down in Naples, has done research on kids with autism, and they actually do, it sounds kind of weird, but they do fecal transplantation from somebody with a healthy microbiome into these kids, and changing the gut flora, the bacteria that's in their gut actually helps with their autism. It's really incredible research. So lots of reasons to eat healthier.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I see it says Nancy and Ray mentioned that they have been eating vegan. She says vegan for the animals. And I know that in Drawdown, I think that plant-based foods are one of the top uh, solutions for drawing down the carbon because, well, they're
Yes.
talking about regenerative agriculture, so
Right.
that has a lot to do, but that
Yeah.
is one of the solutions.
Yeah, when you see, like, it's really interesting. I've been to a number of lectures where the people talk about the amount of energy that's necessary to make a pound of chopped meat, if you will, burger meat. The number of gallons of water and the amount of energy that goes into just making that small amount of food is incredible. And then you think of the land that's necessary to have all these animals on, and the effects that has, and how many individuals can you feed by growing plant-based foods as opposed to animal-based foods? It's a tremendous difference, so there's like, and that's the kind of stuff that for the people that are listening, if you haven't been to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine conference, which this year is coming up in October in Orlando, at the Rosen Shingle Creek Resort, and then the Plantrician Project, they have an annual meeting that's coming up. You learn a lot of this stuff at these national conferences, and anybody can go. Dr. Barnard does his conference in Washington every year. That's the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So there's there's a lot of national organizations that can really teach you more about this whole world of plant-based eating.
One of the things that you happened to mention, I just wondered, you mentioned cheese. You don't want cheese on your eggplant. So is cheese bad for you?
Well, dairy is part of the reason for the weight problem that many people have in this country, and it's really detrimental for people with either diabetes or pre-diabetes.
Oh.
And honestly, it is the one thing, the one food that most people will say is the hardest not to eat. And it's really interesting. There's a book that Dr. Barnard wrote called The Cheese Trap. And he explains in there's a chemical in dairy that's called casomorphone. And it's actually the chemical that cows make to specifically get their calf to feed and to grow bigger and fatter very quickly, you know. And that chemical is like morphine, and it binds to the morphine receptors in the brain, and it makes you almost addicted to dairy. And it really is one of the food products that people will say, I have the hardest time. I can give up soda and I can give up this, that, and the other thing, but cheese is one of the hardest things. So really the short answer is it's not a healthy food product because it's very high in saturated fat. It's very high in calories. And to a degree, it's somewhat addictive. And given the fact that heart disease is the #1 cause of death and disability in this country, cheese is a problem for that reason. You know, it's just got too much fat in it.
I want to thank you so much for coming on and being our reset conversation this evening.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's anything that you haven't said that remains that you'd like to say.
I'm sure that I could go on for hours more. No, you know, if people have any questions, if they want references and such, you know, feel free to contact me. You can, you know, feel free to give my contact information out. I give my cell phone number out to everyone, my email address and such. So
Okay.
feel free to distribute that. And as a matter of fact, so obviously you're taping this. Can I get a copy of the tape?
Yes.
That'd be great.
We'll send that to you.
Yeah, no, this is definitely my pleasure. I think Holly wants to say something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a thank you. It is a thank you, Dr. Sal. I was just thinking, I had to leave the computer for a minute. I was thinking that even 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been as open to this conversation as I am today. And it's because I'm really working on myself right now. So I'm taking it all personally. And in fact, I think this was such a great conversation. I'm going to send the recording to I'm not in Fort Myers anymore. I'm in Olympia, Washington, moved here after Hurricane Ian wrecked our house. And so I have all new healthcare practitioners here, and they're young, they're enlightened, they're awesome here in Olympia, Washington.
Cool.
But I want to share this video with my primary care provider because
please, you know, and you look like you look like you're probably 29. So what you have to think about.
I'll be 72 soon.
Well, so, you know, and you think about it, you know, and I still can't believe, like, I turned 65 this year. I'm like, what the hell happened, you know? But when you think about it, you know, for most of us, most of our lives are behind us. So you have to think about, you know, if God's going to give me another 20, 30 years, whatever is in store for me, how am I going to live in a healthy way so that I could get the most out of those years that I have left? And you know, the best quality and the best longevity. One of my patients gave me a book called 4,000 Weeks, and most people live only 4,000 weeks. So you have to think about in that time frame, how are you living? And now, you know, for most of us, we're probably, you know, in the 60s and 70 age range. How are we going to live the next 20, 30, whatever number of years? It's really an important question.
It sure is. And thank you for helping to answer that.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate everybody being on. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions, because I really enjoy doing this work.
Okay.
Thank you so very much.
We'll put together an email for you all about the cyanobacteria and the brain.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's some good work being done on that in Miami too. So.
Okay, wonderful. Well, everybody have a good night and happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
You
Thanks.
too.
Have a good night.
Well.
Goodbye.
Bye,
everybody.
Stay well.
Thank